What do you do when you get a bunch of unruly youths flying off into space to steal some cryopods from an abandoned space station so they can travel to a different planet without starving to death? Alien Romulus, the 7th feature film in the Alien franchise. I've heard quite a few people give this film a hard time, particularly where its lore friendliness is concerned. Now, I'm no expert on this front, but I can understand the annoyance one might feel when they find out that original plot lines have been altered and changed, going as far back as the original Alien film in 1979. I've heard some complain that it's a travesty that the late Ian Holm featured in the film, or at least a fake version of him did, especially hearing that AI was used. It shows the potential to replace actors entirely going forward, even if his face did look a little odd most of the time. And for some, it just wasn't scary enough, or it was too silly. But despite hearing all of these negatives, and some of which I can agree with more than others, I still like the film. Was our group of doomed heroes stereotypically diverse by Western standards in 2024? Yeah, but unlike, many other forms of entertainment, it A, made sense in the world where space travel is common, and B, wasn't the sole focus of characters' identities. In fact, most of the little tidbits we learnt about them had nothing to do with their religion, race, or cultural background. In the time they have, in the circumstances the story presents to the characters, I thought they were alright. Casting was decent too. Fake Ian Holm aside, I thought everyone did a good job for what it was. The supporting cast played their part well enough. Everyone's favourite Spinny Cayley, whose performance I enjoyed in Civil War, leaned well into the role, and David Johnson, playing the artificial person, did a cracking job being really just unnerving, The environments and sound effects all felt very alien to me. It was desolate, grim, gloomy. There was lots of practical effects being used as well, which really added some sense of creepiness. I actually experienced the film in 4D, and many of the scenes worked particularly well for it, with my seat rolling around for the slower, drifting space scenes, through to the sprays of water hitting my face as some unfortunate soul gets stabbed by a xenomorph's tail. It felt like the perfect film for that kind of experience. I don't really recall the music being particularly stand out though. Bar one track, that is, that had a real manic, old-fashioned digital feel to it as Andy, the synthetic, becomes more and more oppressive and questionable with her motives. So everything seems mostly in check, but what about the story? And yeah, that's where things go a little bit pear-shaped. It's much better than Prometheus and Covenant, not to mention the 4th Alien film, but it still has major flaws. To start, we watch a bunch of young people set out on a rather straightforward objective, but they have numerous issues come up and challenges to overcome. And until all of these problems really start to mount up, they're actually rather efficient at dealing with them. Mostly kept together by the unspoken team leader, they just crack on. Even when things really hit the fan, and there's facehuggers galore and more xenomorphs and sweets in a sweet shop, the team, one way or another, felt real enough with their reactions to me. That is, until about 3/4 of the way through the film, where Rain, our lead, decides to go back and save the synthetic. Given the circumstances that led to his change of character and that, the xenomorphs everywhere, it felt really dumb that she decided to optionally go back to save him, pitting herself against a platoon of xenomorphs to do so. And the wave of dumbness seeps in for this whole section. For example, Rain falls at one point into a rather large hole, and a xenomorph decides to safely catch her with its tail rather than stab her with it, like they always do. It just felt completely out of the character for the alien. Another girl decides to inject herself with some bad experimental juice to stop some pain, even though she's right next to where the cryopods are, so she'd be safe in there, which was their agreed plan anyway. And a slight niggle here and there for me was just the onslaught of callbacks to the previous films. The atmosphere, the xenomorphs, were all enough. I didn't need the other films quoting by these new characters, or plot lines trying to be explained to fill in the gaps between other films. Just let Romulus and the cast be unique. We've already got a thread there with Wayland being around. The end isn't a total cluster, and here's a big spoiler. I did really appreciate the final alien at the end, played by a 7'7" giant, a former basketball player called Robert. Damn! Things like that will never top the Xenomorph in its iconic design, but it was still pretty gruesome, and the actor's unique physical appearance really added to it, even if he did very little in the end. I would recommend this film for sure if you want a horror action experience. It does, however, come with a warning. The more you know about the Alien franchise, the more it may actually trigger you. Rewriting a bit of what happened in the past and putting the appalling use of Ian Holm via AI aside, in my opinion, it's the best the Alien franchise has been in a very long time, but it doesn't top the original 3 films in my head. It gets let's give it 6 Ripleys out of a possible 8 Ripleys. Cheers.